The March rain hammered against the windows of Mondello's, the exclusive steakhouse where I'd been working for exactly 4 months and 11 days. My hands trembled as I pushed through the heavy oak doors, my white blouse already wrinkled from the humidity, my carefully pinned hair threatening to escape its clips. I was already 15 minutes late for my shift. "Marie, where the hell have you been?" Jackson, the shift supervisor, grabbed my arm as I rushed past the hostess stand. His grip tight enough to leave marks. His usually calm demeanor had cracked into something close to panic. "Table 12. Private dining room. You're covering it tonight." "What?" I froze mid-step, my stomach dropping. "But that's Amanda's section. Amanda quit. Walked out an hour ago." Jackson's eyes darted toward the back of the restaurant, then back to me. "Listen to me very carefully, Marie. These are not regular guests. Table 12 is reserved for associates of Mr. Woodruff." My blood turned to ice in my veins. Everyone who worked at Mondello's knew about Willis E. Woodruff, the owner whose name was never spoken above a whisper, who appeared maybe twice a year but whose presence was felt in every corner of the establishment. The staff traded stories in hushed tones during cigarette breaks. Some claimed he was just an eccentric millionaire with unusual business interests. Others said darker things. Things about families that controlled the city's underbelly. Things about men who crossed him and were never seen again. If you're hooked and want to see what happens when Marie faces Willis E. Woodruff, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I'd never laid eyes on him. I made sure of that. Invisible, that was the only way to survive in my situation. "I can't," I started, but Jackson cut me off. "You can and you will." His fingers dug into my shoulder. "Professional, efficient, invisible, just like you always are. Don't draw attention. Don't make mistakes." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "And whatever you do, Marie, don't make them remember you." Too late for that, I thought bitterly. I'd been running for 6 months now, ever since Chicago. 6 months since I'd fled with nothing but a backpack and the clothes on my back, leaving behind an apartment, a life, and a man whose obsession had turned from love into something suffocating and dangerous. This city was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to disappear into the crowd. But fresh starts cost money. And my studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood consumed nearly every dollar I earned. "Who's in there?" I asked, my voice barely steady as I tied my black apron around my waist with shaking fingers. Jackson's eyes did another nervous sweep of the dining room. "Business associates. From out of town. And..." He hesitated. "Mr. Woodruff himself." The words hit me like a physical blow. "He's here. Tonight. Table 12. Back private room." Jackson straightened my collar with hands that weren't entirely steady either. "Remember what I said. Professional. Efficient. Invisible. Invisible." That had been my entire existence for 6 months. Keeping my head down, never making eye contact, fading into the background like furniture. Speaking only when spoken to. Never revealing too much, never showing the education I'd worked so hard for. Never letting anyone see that I was more than just another struggling server trying to make rent. I took a shaky breath and moved through the main dining room. Mondello's oozed old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Dark leather booths, polished mahogany, dim Edison bulbs casting amber light across white tablecloths. Crystal glasses caught the light like trapped stars. The air smelled of aged beef and expensive cigars. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I walked with practiced composure, spine straight, chin level, the way I'd trained myself. Through the main dining area, past the bar where guests nursed drinks that cost more than my weekly groceries, down a hallway I'd only glimpsed before. At the end of the corridor stood a door different from all the others. Heavier, darker. The kind of door that said everything that happened beyond it was none of your business. My heart hammered against my ribs as I raised my hand to knock. For one wild moment I considered turning around, walking out, disappearing into the rainy night and never coming back. But I needed this job, desperately. Without it I had nothing. Nowhere to go. And nowhere left to run. I knocked twice. Professional. Enter. The voice that came from within wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. The kind of voice that expected obedience and had never been denied it. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The private dining room was darker than the main restaurant, lit by recessed lighting that cast everything in shades of gold and shadow. A long rectangular table dominated the space, and around it sat 5 men in suits that probably cost more than I'd earned in the past year combined. Their conversation died the instant I entered, and 5 sets of eyes tracked my movement across the threshold. But only one gaze locked onto mine with the intensity of a predator that had just spotted prey. He sat at the head of the table, not because of where he was positioned, but because everything in that room bent toward him like gravity itself had shifted. Dark tattoos crawled up his neck from beneath his collar, disappearing into his hairline and marking his shaved head with intricate patterns that spoke of violence, loyalty, and stories I couldn't read. More ink covered his hands that rested casually on the table, completely still, but radiating coiled power. Willis E. Woodruff. Even without introduction I knew. The way every other man at the table deferred to him with their body language. The way the air seemed thinner in his presence, harder to breathe. He wasn't handsome in any conventional sense. His face was brutal, sharp angles, a nose that had been broken at least once, a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. But his eyes, God! His eyes were the most unsettling thing about him. Dark, intelligent, absolutely cold. They looked at me not like I was a person, but like I was a problem he was already 3 steps ahead of solving. Good evening, gentlemen. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Training kicking in despite the terror. I'm Marie, and I'll be serving you tonight. May I start with drinks? I moved around the table with practiced efficiency, hyper-aware of those tattooed fingers tapping once, just once, against the white tablecloth as I took orders from the other men. When I finally reached the head of the table, Willis E. Woodruff didn't immediately respond to my question about his preference. Instead he studied me. Really looked at me. Not the way men sometimes did, that was easy to deflect, easy to ignore. This was different. Calculating. Dissecting. You're new, he said finally. Not a question. A statement. His voice was rough, like gravel wrapped in silk. 4 months, sir, I replied, pen hovering over my notepad, eyes fixed on the paper rather than his face. Look at me when I'm speaking to you. It wasn't a request. I lifted my gaze, forcing myself to meet those cold, dark eyes. Mistake. The moment our eyes locked, something shifted in his expression. Interest, maybe. Or recognition of something he'd been searching for. 4 months, he repeated slowly, as if testing the words. And yet I've never seen you before. I work the early shifts usually, sir. This is my first time covering the private room. A ghost of something, not quite a smile, more like satisfaction, touched his lips. Lucky me. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. Scotch. Me. Top shelf. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me before I'd taken 2 steps. Marie. My real name on his lips sent ice through my veins. I hadn't told him my name. I just said I'm Marie as part of my standard greeting, but the way he said it, like he'd known it already, like he'd been waiting to say it, made my skin prickle with warning. Yes, sir. Don't keep us waiting too long. I slipped out of the room, my legs trembling as I pulled the heavy door closed behind me. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall and tried to catch my breath. Something about that room, about him, made the air impossible to breathe. I hurried to the bar to place the drink orders, my mind racing. Why had Amanda really quit? Had she served that table before? Had she seen something or heard something that made her walk away from a job at Mondello's, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city? When I returned with the tray of drinks, the atmosphere in the room had changed. The men were speaking in low voices, papers spread across the table between them. Business. But what kind? I distributed the drinks in silence, trying to embody Jackson's instruction. Invisible. Professional. Efficient. As I placed the scotch in front of Willis E. Woodruff, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. My heart stopped. Whoa. Not now. Not here. I had one rule. One absolute, unbreakable rule. Never answer personal calls during a shift. But I'd kept my phone on me for 3 weeks now, ever since the messages started coming. Desperate messages. Urgent messages. Messages I couldn't ignore. The phone vibrated again. Insistent. Emergency. I glanced at the table. The men were deep in conversation. Hands gesturing over documents. Maybe they wouldn't notice if I just stepped back, just for 1 second, just to. I took 2 small steps toward the corner of the room, pulled out my phone and looked at the screen. The number made my throat tighten. I shouldn't answer. I knew I shouldn't. But I pressed the button anyway and lifted the phone to my ear. Pronto, I whispered, the Italian slipping out automatically the way it always did. The word barely audible. Just a breath. The entire room fell silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned toward me. And Willis E. Woodruff's eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, locked onto me with the focus of a man who had just discovered something valuable. His head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly, like a predator adjusting its angle on prey. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then I heard it. So quiet I almost missed it. Willis E. Woodruff leaning toward the man seated to his right, a massive figure with scars on his knuckles, and murmuring 2 words that changed everything. Find her. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of mechanical movements, clearing plates, refilling glasses, avoiding eye contact. Every time I entered that private room, Willis E. Woodruff's gaze tracked me like a thermal scope. He didn't speak to me again. Didn't need to. Those 2 words, find her, echoed in my skull like a death sentence. By the time the table finally cleared at 11:30, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely untie my apron. I'd already made my decision. Grab my coat, slip out the service entrance, disappear into the rain-soaked streets, and never come back. I'd done it before. Could do it again. Marie. Jackson appeared at my elbow, his face ashen. Mr. Woodruff wants to see you. His office. Now. My stomach dropped. I have to clock out. Now, Marie. His hand on my arm wasn't a suggestion. He led me through the kitchen, past curious stares from the line cooks, down a hallway I'd never noticed before. At the end stood a door of dark wood with no nameplate, no window. Jackson knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Miss Turner, sir. He practically pushed me inside and closed the door behind me, leaving me alone with the most dangerous man I'd ever met. The office was exactly what I expected. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes that looked read rather than decorative. A massive desk dominated the space. Behind it sat Willis E. Woodruff, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up to reveal tattoos that covered his forearms in intricate detail. Dates, names, symbols I couldn't decipher. He didn't look up immediately. Instead, he finished writing something in a leather journal. His penmanship surprisingly elegant. When he finally raised his eyes to mine, I felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. Sit. I sat, perched on the edge of the leather chair across from him, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. He reached into a drawer and withdrew a slim folder, placing it on the desk between us. Manila. Unremarkable. Terrifying. Marie Josephine Turner, he began, his voice calm, almost conversational. Born in Milan. Moved to Chicago at age 12 after your mother's death. Father Anthony Turner remarried when you were 15. You didn't get along with your stepmother. He opened the folder, his tattooed fingers precise. Graduated University of Chicago with a degree in international business. Fluent in Italian and English, conversational French. You worked at Caruso and Associates for 3 years as a cultural liaison until... He paused, his eyes lifting to mine. Until 6 months ago, when you fled Chicago with nothing but a backpack and $900 in cash. The room tilted. My mouth went dry. You're running from someone, he continued, turning a page. Ex-boyfriend. David Castellano. Son of Frank Castellano, who owns half the construction contracts on the South Side. He looked up again. You filed a restraining order. Didn't work. You left instead. Tears burned behind my eyes. How? I made a phone call, Willis said simply. Had this compiled while you were serving dessert. He closed the folder with a soft snap. Now, let's talk about why someone with your education is serving steak to men like me, and what you're going to do about the fact that I now own every secret you have. His eyes held mine, dark and patient and absolutely merciless. Starting with why you speak Italian like a native, and what you were so desperate to hear that you'd risk answering a phone in my presence. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The walls of Willis's office seemed to contract around me, the air growing thinner with each passing second. The phone call, I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. My father. He had a stroke. He's in ICU. I needed to know if... I stopped, unable to finish. Willis's expression didn't change. No sympathy. No judgment. Just that calculating gaze that saw too much. Your stepmother called. Wants money for his medical bills. Money you don't have. Course he knew. He knew everything. I have a proposition for you, Marie. He leaned back in his chair. His tattooed fingers steepled beneath his chin. I have business in Italy. Tuscany, Rome, Milan. Negotiations that require someone who speaks native Italian, understands both American and Italian business culture, and can navigate high-stakes situations with discretion. His eyes held mine. Someone with your exact qualifications. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm a server. You're a cultural liaison with a degree in international business who's been hiding that fact because you're running from a man who won't accept that you left him. Willis's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. I'm offering you a job, Marie. 2 weeks in Italy as my personal translator. All expenses paid. Private jet. Luxury accommodations, security. He paused. And compensation of $50,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $50,000. Enough to pay my father's medical bills. Enough to disappear properly if I needed to. Enough to... Why me? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Because you're desperate. Because you're qualified. Because you understand what it means to keep your mouth shut. His eyes darkened. And because I've already had you investigated. I know exactly what leverage I have. There it was. The threat beneath the offer. I need an answer, Marie. Willis opened another drawer, removing an envelope thick with papers. The jet leaves tomorrow at noon. This contains your contract, first-class ticket information, and an advance of $5,000. Enough to wire to Chicago tonight for your father's immediate care. He knew about the wire transfer. He'd already arranged it. My hands trembled as I stared at the envelope. And if I say no, then you walk out of here. Continue your life as a server. Hope David Castellano never thinks to look for you in this city. He tilted his head slightly. But we both know he's already looking. I found you in 4 hours, Marie. How long do you think it'll take him? The implicit threat hung between us like smoke. Willis wasn't offering me a choice. He was offering me the illusion of one. One more thing, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What exactly is this business in Italy? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Nothing you need to worry about. You translate. You observe. You keep your mouth shut. That's all. I looked at the envelope. At the man who held my entire life in a manila folder. At the door that led back to invisibility and fear. I accept. Willis pushed the envelope across the desk. Good. A car will pick you up from your apartment at 10 a.m. tomorrow. He stood, buttoning his cuffs with precise movements. Pack light. I'll provide everything you need. I took the envelope with shaking hands and turned toward the door. Anne-Marie. His voice stopped me. I looked back. His eyes were cold, absolute. Don't try to run. I always find what's mine. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat on my apartment floor until dawn. The envelope from Willis open beside me. $5,000 in cash spread across the worn carpet like evidence of a crime I'd just committed. At 6 a.m., I wired the money to Chicago. My stepmother's voice had cracked with relief. I'd hung up before she could ask questions. 7. I noticed him. A man in a dark sedan parked across the street. Engine running, eyes on my building. He'd been there all night. Watching. Making sure I didn't run. At precisely 10 a.m., a black SUV pulled up. The watcher spoke into his wrist, then drove away. His replacement stepped out of the SUV. 6'4", built like a freight train, with the dead eyes of someone who'd killed before and would again. Miss Turner. I'm here for your luggage. I handed him my single duffel bag. He looked at it, then at me, but said nothing. The drive to the private airfield took 30 minutes through morning traffic. No conversation. No radio. Just the sound of rain against bulletproof glass and my own thundering heartbeat. The jet was smaller than I'd imagined, but infinitely more luxurious. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, a cabin that smelled of expensive cologne and power. Willis sat in the rear, laptop open, on a phone call in what sounded like Russian. He gestured for me to sit without breaking conversation. I chose a seat across the aisle. Close enough to be summoned. Far enough to pretend I had autonomy. Once we were airborne, Willis ended his call and turned that full attention on me. Your duties are simple. Translate during meetings. Attend dinners and social functions. Observe conversations and report anything that seems off. He poured himself whiskey despite the early hour. You represent me now. That means you speak when I tell you to speak. You smile when I tell you to smile. You become invisible when I need you invisible. And if I hear something illegal, you'll hear many illegal things, Marie. His eyes held mine. Your job is to translate them accurately, not to judge them morally. A flight attendant appeared with a garment bag. Willis nodded toward it. For tonight, we have dinner with associates in Florence. You'll need to look the part. Anne zipped the bag. Inside hung a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, with matching heels and a velvet jewelry box containing diamond earrings. I can't accept. You already did. When you took my money. Willis's voice was soft but absolute. Everything you wear, everything you touch, everything you are for the next 2 weeks belongs to me. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. The words should have terrified me. They did. But beneath the fear was something else. A dark thrill at being seen, being claimed, being valuable enough to control. We landed in Florence at sunset. Another SUV. Another silent driver. We wound through Tuscan hills as twilight painted the vineyards gold and purple, until we arrived at a villa that looked like it had stood for centuries. High stone walls. Security cameras. Men with guns who nodded respectfully as we passed. "Welcome home," Willis said, though it was clearly his home, not mine. A woman in staff uniform appeared. "Your rooms are prepared, Senior Woodruff. Dinner is at 8. Rooms. Plural. Least I'd have that." Willis's hand found the small of my back as we entered. Possessive, proprietary, burning through the fabric of my coat. "Marie," he murmured against my ear. "You're not a prisoner here. But make no mistake. You can't leave without my permission. The gates are locked. The guards have their orders. And even if you ran..." His fingers pressed slightly harder. "Find you. I always do." The cage door closed with a whisper. Marie's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate gold bracelet on her wrist. Willis had given it to her that morning with a casual instruction that felt anything but casual. "If you hear something that doesn't add up, something I should know about, just touch it. Natural-like." The conference room at the Continental overlooked the Chicago River, all steel and glass and masculine power. 3 Italian men sat across from Willis and his associates, their expensive suits unable to disguise the coiled violence in their shoulders. Marie recognized their type immediately. The same predatory stillness her father's business partners had carried into their Marseille apartment when she was a child. "Signorina Dubois will be translating for us today," Willis announced, his hand light on her shoulder. A claim of ownership that made the Italian's eyes sharpen with interest. The older one, Salvatore Benedetti, smiled without warmth. "How fortunate. We can speak freely in our native tongue." What followed was an education in the architecture of crime dressed in the language of legitimate business. Shipping manifests became coded discussions of smuggling routes. Profit margins translated to money laundering percentages. Quality control meant enforcement and elimination. Marie's voice remained steady as she converted Italian into English, French phrases occasionally bridging the gap when direct translation would have been too crude. Then Benedetti said something that made her pulse quicken. In Italian, fluid and confident, "The Baltimore arrangement is already settled. We've guaranteed exclusive access to the eastern ports through our partnership with the Kellerman organization." But when his associate translated the same statement moments later, supposedly correcting Marie's interpretation for clarity, the Kellerman name had vanished. Instead, "We have preliminary agreements that we'd be happy to discuss further." Marie's fingers found the bracelet. One deliberate touch, then back to her notepad. Willis's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He leaned forward slightly. "Interesting. I was under the impression the Baltimore situation was still fluid. Multiple parties involved, you might say." Benedetti's smile froze. His translator shot him a panicked glance. "Perhaps," Willis continued, his voice soft as silk over steel, "we should discuss your exclusive partnership with Kellerman. Since you've apparently already concluded negotiations that were meant to include my organization." The rest of the meeting was a masterclass in controlled intimidation. Willis recalibrated the entire negotiation, using the Italians' deception as leverage to secure better terms and a larger share of their operations. Marie translated each calculated threat, each veiled promise of consequences, her voice the instrument of Willis's will. When the Italians finally left, diminished and wary, Willis turned to her. Really looked at her for the first time since that night in the jazz club. "You caught the Kellerman switch. I speak Italian, Mr. Willis." "Both versions." He moved closer, studying her face with unsettling intensity. "You're not just beautiful and fluent. You're sharp." His fingers traced the bracelet on her wrist. "That makes you dangerous." Marie met his gaze, refusing to look away. "Only if you're lying to me." His laugh was genuine, surprised. "Dangerous in its own way. Then I'd better not lie." The rain hammered against the windows of Willis's penthouse 3 nights after the Italian meeting. Marie stood at the glass, watching lightning fracture the sky over Lake Michigan, a brandy warming in her hand. Behind her, Willis sat in his leather chair, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms marked with ink. "My brother would have liked you," he said suddenly. He turned. He'd never mentioned family before. "Michael. Younger by 2 years." Willis's voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "Smarter than me. Better. Wanted to be a lawyer, can you believe that? Legitimate." His laugh was bitter. "Got himself killed trying to keep me out of a bad situation. Took a bullet meant for me outside a speakeasy in 27. Marie moved closer, drawn by the rawness in his admission. "I'm sorry. I wasn't always this." He gestured vaguely at the expensive room, the empire beyond it. "Started running numbers to keep us fed after our old man drank himself to death. Michael kept studying, kept believing we'd make it out clean." Willis met her eyes. Then he didn't. The tattoo on his left forearm. She'd noticed it before but never understood. Now she saw it clearly. A date, initials, a single word in Latin. Fidelis. "Faithful," she translated softly. "The only thing worth being in this world." Willis stood, rolling his sleeve higher to reveal more ink. Compass rose on his bicep. "Every person I've lost. Every oath I've kept. Every line I won't cross." He touched a marking near his collarbone. "My mother. Cancer. I was 16. Another on his ribs. Tommy Brennan. Took a knife for me in 29. Marie understood suddenly. The fierce loyalty he inspired, the code that governed his violence. He was a man who protected his own with religious devotion, who killed without hesitation but never without reason. "In Marseille," she heard herself say, "my father thought he could work with them, the milieu, and stay untouched. Keep his hands clean while taking their money." She moved closer still. "They killed him anyway. Because in the end, there's no such thing as half measures in this life." Willis's hand came up to her face, rough fingers surprisingly gentle. "Is that what you think? That you're taking half measures with me? I don't know what I'm doing anymore." The truth of it hung between them. She should be planning escape, counting the days until his interest waned. Instead she was memorizing the stories written on his skin, feeling her pulse quicken when he entered a room. Marie. Her name in his mouth was different now. Not possession. Something more complicated. When he kissed her, she didn't pull away. His mouth tasted like whiskey and inevitability. His hands tangling in her hair with a hunger that matched her own. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake like a warning she chose not to hear. Later, tracing the ink across his chest, she whispered, "What happens when I become one of your stories?" His arms tightened around her. "Then I make sure it has a better ending than the others." But they both knew some stories only end one way. The emerald necklace lay in black velvet like a promise and a threat. Marie stared at it in the morning light of Willis's bedroom, her fingers hovering over stones that caught fire in the sun. "It was my mother's," Willis said from the doorway, buttoning his shirt. "Only thing she had worth keeping. She'd want you to have it." Marie's breath caught. In his world, this wasn't jewelry. It was consecration. "Willis, I can't." "You can." He crossed to her, lifting the necklace with surprising gentleness. "You will. We leave for Naples in 3 days. I'm introducing you to the Calabrian families." His hand settled the stones against her throat, cool and heavy. "As mine." Naples in September was golden light and ancient violence. The Villa Orlandi overlooked the bay, filled with men whose tailored suits barely civilized them and women who watched Marie with calculation behind their champagne smiles. She wore cream silk and her mother's emeralds. No, Willis's mother's emeralds, and felt the weight of every gaze. "Gentlemen," Willis announced in the marble hall, his hand possessive at her waist. "My Marie. She speaks your language better than you do, so mind your manners." The laughter was respectful, careful. This wasn't an introduction. It was a declaration of territory. She translated for him through dinner, her Italian flowing like wine, watching powerful men defer to Willis's judgment and, increasingly, to hers. When she offered an opinion on shipping routes, they listened. When she laughed at a joke, they relaxed. She was no longer the invisible girl serving champagne at the Moulin Rouge. She was Marie Dubois, and her name meant something now. In the powder room, an Italian woman with diamonds and cold eyes cornered her. "The emeralds look lovely on you. I remember when his mother wore them." She reapplied lipstick with surgical precision. "For girls before you have sat at his table. None of them wore those stones. None of them lasted." Marie met her gaze in the mirror. "Perhaps they weren't meant to." The woman's smile was sharp. "Or perhaps you simply haven't learned yet what it costs." Later, as Willis conducted business on the terrace, his lieutenant Frank pulled her aside. He was older, scarred, loyal as a wolfhound. "I've known Willis since we were running bootleg whiskey in Cleveland," Frank said quietly. "Seen him with plenty of women. Beautiful ones. Smart ones." He studied her face. "Never seen him bring one into the family like this. Never seen him give anyone his mother's jewels." "Is that a warning?" "It's an observation." Frank's expression was unreadable. "You're either very special to him, Miss Dubois, or very dangerous. Maybe both. Either way, there's no walking away now. Not for you. Not for him." That night, in their hotel suite overlooking the bay, Willis pulled her close. "You were perfect today. They respect you. That matters." Marie touched the emeralds at her throat, feeling their weight like a collar, like a crown. "I'm not invisible anymore." "No." His kiss was possessive, claiming, "You're mine. The whole world knows it now." She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt powerful. That was when she knew she was lost. The market in Little Italy should have been safe. Willis's territory, his people, broad daylight. Marie had insisted on going, needing air, normalcy, something beyond gilded cages and emerald chains. Frank had driven her, waited by the car while she browsed Purdue's stalls, pretending for 10 precious minutes that she was ordinary. She noticed the men too late. 3 of them moving with purpose through the crowd. One met her eyes and smiled, the wrong kind of smile. Benedetti's smile from the Palmer House meeting. Marie ran through narrow streets, her heels catching on cobblestones, her heart a drum against her ribs. Behind her, footsteps and Italian curses. She ducked into an alley, found a fire escape, climbed with shaking hands. Her father's voice in her head. When they come for you, ma petite, you make yourself small. You make yourself survive. The rooftop was tar and broken bottles. She crouched behind a ventilation shaft, breathing through her teeth, fingers finding the small knife Willis had given her weeks ago. Just in case, he'd said. She'd laughed then. Not laughing now. The men reached the roof. Spread out. Hunting. Come out, Bella. We just want to talk. Ask you some questions about your Willis. She waited until one passed close, then drove the knife into his thigh with everything she had. His scream brought the others running. Marie was already moving, scrambling toward the opposite edge. Strong hands caught her, slammed her against brick. Pain exploded across her cheek. Stupid girl. Benedetti wants you alive, but he didn't say undamaged. Then the rooftop door exploded open. Willis moved like violence given form. The first man went down with his throat crushed before he could turn. The second reached for his gun. Willis broke his arm, took the weapon, used it as a club. Methodical. Surgical. Terrifying. The man holding Marie released her, hands raised. Willis, wait. You touched her. It was just business, we were sending a message. Willis shot him in the kneecap. The scream echoed off buildings. Wrong message. What followed wasn't execution. It was education. Willis made the man tell him everything. Who sent them, why, what Benedetti planned next. Each refusal cost another bone, another joint. Marie watched, her back against brick, unable to look away. When it was finished, Willis turned to her. Blood spattered his shirt, his hands, his face. His eyes were empty of everything human. Don't look at me like that, she said. He froze. Like what? Like you expect me to run. Marie pushed off the wall, legs shaking but holding. Like you're waiting for me to see the monster and finally understand what I've gotten into. Marie. I grew up in Marseille during the war. I watched men kill each other over bread. She touched his bloodied hand. I know what you are, Willis. I've always known. Then why? Because you're my monster. The truth of it settled in her bones. Because when I was bleeding on this roof, I wasn't praying for salvation. I was waiting for you. Something cracked in his expression. He pulled her close, heedless of the blood, and she held on just as tightly. I'll burn the world down before I let them touch you again. I know, Marie whispered. That's why I'm staying. The ledger spread across Willis's desk told stories in numbers. Shipments that were bribes, investments that were extortion, payroll that included half the Chicago Police Department. Marie studied them in the lamplight, her finger tracing routes and percentages with growing understanding. The Italians are bleeding us through the waterfront unions, she said. Here. And here. They're using legitimate labor disputes to shut down our operations while running their own shipments through. Willis looked up from his whiskey. Something like pride in his expression. Go on. We can't fight them directly without starting a war. Marie's mind worked through possibilities her old self would never have considered. But we can turn their own strategy against them. The union leadership, they're loyal to money, not principle. If we offer them more than Benedetti, give them protection he can't, they'll shut down his operations instead of ours. And he'll never prove it was us. Just bad luck. Labor trouble. Marie met Willis's eyes. Sometimes the best violence is the kind nobody can see. He came around the desk, pulled her to her feet. When did you get so ruthless? I learned from the best. That night, she attended the meeting with the union men. Not as translator. As negotiator. She offered terms in English, French, and Italian, reading each man's tells, knowing exactly how much to promise and what to threaten. When it was done, they had their alliance, and Benedetti's waterfront empire would crumble within a month. "You didn't need me there," Willis said in the car afterward. No. Marie felt the truth of it, intoxicating and terrible. "I didn't." The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like finally becoming herself. A week later, one of Benedetti's lieutenants made a last desperate attempt to salvage their operation. He brought proof of their arrangement to a rival organization, trying to leverage it into new protection. Willis received word within hours. "He needs to disappear," Willis said simply, "before he talks to anyone else." Marie understood what he was asking, what line they were approaching together. "I know someone," she said quietly. "From Marseille. In Montreal now. He specializes in making problems vanish quietly." Her father's old associate, the one who'd helped her escape France. Who owed her a debt she'd never intended to call in. Willis studied her face. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. This is my world now too." She made the call, gave the details, felt something inside her shift and settle into place. Not breaking, but transforming into something harder, sharper, capable of surviving in darkness. That night, Willis came to her not with the possessive hunger of before, but with something deeper. Reverence. Recognition. When he touched her, it was as an equal finally claiming her equal. "I love you," he said against her skin. "Not because you're beautiful. Not because you're useful. 'Cause you're you. All of you. Even the parts that scare you." Marie pulled him closer. "I love you too. God help us both. Too late for divine intervention, Sherry." "I know." She kissed him, tasting whiskey and inevitability and choice. "I chose this. Choose you. I choose what I'm becoming." At the next gathering of Willis's organization, he introduced her differently. "My partner. In everything." The men nodded, accepted, understood. Marie Dubois had disappeared. In her place stood someone new. Someone who spoke 5 languages, negotiated with criminals, and no longer flinched at the weight of emeralds or the price of power. She was finally, terribly, completely free. The message came at midnight. Benedetti had made his move. Not against their operations, but against Willis himself. A coordinated strike involving federal prosecutors he'd bought, evidence he'd manufactured, arrest warrants signed and sealed. "They're coming at dawn," Frank reported, his face grim. "They've built a case. Racketeering, murder, smuggling. They have witnesses." Willis remained calm, but Marie saw the calculation in his eyes. "How many witnesses?" "4. All willing to testify." Marie was already moving to the phone. "Give me their names." By 3 a.m. she'd made 6 calls. To contacts in Montreal, New York, Marseille. By 4 a.m., 2 of Benedetti's witnesses had received better offers and disappeared into the night. The third found photographs of his family on his doorstep with a simple note in Italian that Marie had dictated. The fourth, the most dangerous, required a different approach. "I'll meet with him," Marie said. "Absolutely not," Willis started. "He's Italian. Old country. He won't take orders from you, but he might listen to me." She touched the emeralds at her throat. "Let me try." The warehouse meeting was tense, dangerous. Marie faced the witness, a scarred man named Caruso, with only Frank in the shadows as backup. "Signor Caruso," she said in flawless Italian. "You're a man of honor. So let me speak plainly. Benedetti is using you to settle his own debts. When this is over, do you think he'll protect you? Or will you be the next problem he eliminates? Willis Woodruff is a criminal. So is Benedetti. So are we all. Marie leaned forward. The difference is Willis keeps his word. You work for him, your family. You betray him, you're dead. But you're useful to him alive, Signor Caruso. Very useful. And we protect what's useful. She outlined terms. Protection, money, a new territory to oversee. Caruso listened, his eyes moving between her and the shadows where Frank waited. You speak for him? Caruso asked finally. I speak with him. We're partners. Caruso studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Benedetti is a fool. He didn't see what Willis has in you. By dawn, when the federal prosecutors arrived with their warrants, their case had evaporated. Witnesses recanted. Evidence disappeared. Within a week, Benedetti himself vanished. Some said to Sicily, some said to a shallow grave. Marie didn't ask which. 3 months later, Marie stood in the private dining room of the Ambassador East, speaking rapid Italian to representatives from 5 families. Her ring caught the light, a diamond that meant Willis Woodruff's wife, his partner, his equal. The child growing inside her was still a secret, but not for long. Willis watched from across the table, his hand occasionally finding hers, a touch that communicated entire conversations. When the negotiations concluded favorably, they always did now, he pulled her close. Remember when you were terrified of being seen, he murmured. Marie smiled, touching his face, tracing the edge of a tattoo that peeked above his collar. I thought visibility meant vulnerability. But standing beside you, I learned that being seen by the right person doesn't make you weak. It makes you untouchable. She looked around the room at men who respected her, feared her, understood that she and Willis were one force now, inseparable and unbreakable. I found my home in the darkness, she whispered, in the arms of a man whose tattoos tell stories of violence, but whose eyes tell the story of me. Willis kissed her, possessive and proud. Welcome home, Mrs. Woodruff. And Marie, no longer invisible, no longer afraid, kissed him back. Thank you for watching this story till the end. If you enjoy this story, you will surely love the next one.